Hi creative friends, this is Jane from Sustain My Craft Habit, and today I'm going to show you how to make these beautiful seascape inspired cutting boards with resin handles. Welcome back to our channel. This DIY project is a part of our new series all about handmade gift ideas. So I'd seen similar beach inspired cutting boards on Instagram over the summer and was excited to give it a try and figure it out. I must say, if you're new to resin crafting, this might not be the best project to start with. It's probably one of the more complicated ones we've done to date, and that's mainly because it involves multiple steps really over several days. I used different colors of resin and various techniques such as resin lacing, which were new to me as well. However, with a bit of patience and practice, I'm sure you can master this DIY and make really these beautiful one-of-a-kind cutting boards for yourself or as gifts for friends and family. So let's get started. For all the materials that you need for our project, visit our written tutorial on the blog, and I'll leave a link for that in the description below. The first step in this project will be to paint the handle. But prior to painting, we want to tape off the back side of the cutting board so that any resin that seeps around to that side doesn't stick to the cutting board on the back. The key here is to use a good quality tape that will adhere to the wooden cutting board. I used a green painter's tape and just made sure to really press down along the edges. So I also, with a sharp utility knife, trimmed off carefully just by freehand the excess tape that went over the edges. And this is because, as you'll see, I actually chose to paint around the outer side of the handle, but not all the way to the back. Sometimes it's easy to procrastinate on a project, especially if you haven't done it before and are unsure how it's going to turn out, or it has multiple steps. So that was happening to me with this particular project, so I decided to just use these cheap canvases that I have downstairs and test out my painting technique first. So once I felt good that I knew how the paints were going to blend together and how this was going to look, then it was easy to move on and do this one, which I didn't want to mess up because it was a little more expensive, right? So once you're happy with your design that you practice and the back side is nicely taped off, it's time to paint the handle. So as you can see here, I used 3 shades of teal blue, so a really dark, well, this is actually like a dark royal blue, a nice bright teal color, and then a lighter turquoise. So this provides a really nice range of colors, especially when blended together, from light to dark blue. And finally, the 4th color in there is a sand color. And these are just your regular acrylic craft paints that I'm using. So I have to say that by no means am I a professional artist or a painter, but this technique was actually pretty simple, just keeping it simple. So we started with the really dark blue at the tip of the handle and painted it down along the handle at a diagonal. And then after about a quarter way down, I layered in the next I layered in the medium teal color. And you can see that I did a just very simple kind of blending. I didn't even bother cleaning my brushes between the different colors. And this works really well, especially if you're going from darker to lighter shades of any color. So then finally, I went along with the lighter turquoise color all the way to the end. So you're thinking of this like going from deep water to more shallow water. And the shallowest water is the light turquoise, which will join at the beach. And this is the sandy color that I'm painting on right now. You do want to use a separate paintbrush for the sand because we want to keep it not blue, but that nice beachy sandy color. And that's really it in terms of the painting. You actually don't want to fiddle with it too much. I find often that less is more. But once you're happy with your range of colors from light to dark in your little seascape, then you can move on to the next step of pouring the resin. Okay, so now that I've painted my handles, gradiated from dark to light and the sand part, I'm going to do one small layer of resin pour in the sand color and just confine to this front area of the board. So I've actually elevated my boards, the back side is taped. I've put them on a couple of cups and we are ready to pour. So ideally, the resin, when you're working with it, is warm to the touch. If it's not, then I like to start by putting them in a little bowl of water, warm water, not hot, to warm it up. This helps to minimize the bubbles that form. And if the resin is too cold, when you mix it together, the hardener and the resin, then it can create a cloudy finish, which you don't want. So I've warmed up my bottles a little bit. This is a 2-part mix. We're going to measure equal amounts of the resin and the hardener. And I only need a little bit to do, as I said, this front part of the seascape. Make sure you work in a well-ventilated area and always wear your gloves. We're going to start by pouring half an ounce just under the resin. Now we'll do the hardener. So add another half ounce. I didn't really leave myself very much room for mixing, but just be careful. Always make sure to protect your working surface with something that won't seep through. Okay, so we're going to use one wooden stir stick and stir this really well for 2 minutes, which is now going to be challenging because my cup is so full. Stirred this mixture for about 2 minutes now, and I'm going to pour it into a second clean cup. I'm going to use a second clean spoon, a stir stick, and stir this for another minute. I definitely poured too much into this cup. It's one of the trickiest part about working with the resin is not always being sure how much to mix up. And I tend to mix too much just because of the time required to do it. But I always try to have, if I'm not sure how much resin I'm going to need, the second little project on the side to use up any leftover resin. I think right now I'm feeling that this is probably more than what I'm going to need for what I want to accomplish right now. But I have 2 more boards on the side that I'm going to use whatever resin is left over on so that it doesn't go to waste. Okay, so that's been stirring about a minute, and I'm just going to now add in a little bit of the acrylic paint that I used. So for the sand, this is called Driftwood, which is just acrylic craft paint. And I'm gonna put in maybe a good squeeze. You don't want to do too much because it can interfere with how the resin sets, but I also do want it to have a good amount in there. Now I'm going to try to stir this together a bit more. So if you can see it, it kind of has a striated effect. But as you stir it together, it will all blend. So it actually has a bit of a grainy texture, which I don't mind because we're trying to mimic sand. So Let me see if I can get in a little bit closer to show you. So now I am just going to pour a line of my tinted resin here along the shoreline to coincide with what I had painted already. And I don't mind if it pours off the backside because I actually want the resin to pour over and cover the side of the cutting board. I'm just going to use my wooden stick to draw the sand resin to create this kind of curved edge. And pull the excess back. Now I'm going to repeat that over here on this piece. So as I mentioned, I have a lot of this resin left over. I needed a lot less, but I have two pieces. These are my practice pieces. I'm going to use this resin to cover the area down here. Before I do that though, I'm going to use my heat torch to push the resin back a bit and to blow off any bubbles. Okay, so this is my first layer of resin. I'm going to actually just cover this and let it cure overnight, and then tomorrow we'll come and finish the rest of it. It's time to pour the second layer of resin over our handle. So I'm going to mix up probably 2 ounces would be plenty. So 1 ounce each of the resin and the hardener for this project. So we start with the resin, and I like to try to warm up my bottles. It's really important to make sure that your resin isn't cold to the touch when you're using it. So sometimes if it's cold outside or cold in the room, I will actually put the bottles in a bowl with warm water just to heat them up a bit. But it's pretty warm around here these days, so I just heated it up a bit in my hand. If the resin and the hardener are cold when you mix them, then you can end up getting a cloudy result in the end. So now all we're going to do is mix these together for 2 minutes to ensure that they're completely blended. It's been just about 2 minutes now. You can see the resin went from a little bit cloudy when we first started mixing the 2 parts together to a clear color. And I'm using the side of the wooden stir stick to scrape the side of the cup, the mixing cup. Okay, so now we've done this cup for 2 minutes. We are going to pour our resin mixture into a clean cup and continue stirring for another minute. And this is critical to ensure that the 2 parts are completely blended. Otherwise, if you don't do this part, and any part of it is not completely blended, you could have difficulty with the resin solution curing properly. You could end up being sticky and tacky in the end, which you really do not want. So we put it into a clean cup, and then I even like to use a new stick and continue stirring for another minute. You want to be careful when you're stirring to kind of go slow, because you don't want to introduce too many unnecessary bubbles. The bubbles will kind of dissipate, and you will use a torch or air to blow off bubbles on your surface, but it always helps to minimize that as much as possible in the stirring by going slowly and consistently. So one of the nice things about the Envirotex Light Resin is that you have about 45 minutes of working time. So it's nice because you don't have to go too fast. And what I'm going to do now is take a little bit of my clear resin and pour it into a small amount into a smaller cup to color white, because that's going to be the white waves on my design. And that's about ½ an ounce out of the full amount that I poured, which I think should be enough for what I want to do. Now I'm going to take yet another measuring craft stick and add in some of this Cast and Craft opaque pigment. So this is the white one. Stir it up really well. Okay, so we've mixed our opaque pigment, and you could also use a white acrylic craft paint. However, this has been specifically formulated to color epoxy resins. So we're going to start just by putting in 2 squeezes of the pigment. You don't want to use too much because, again, it can interfere with the curing process of the resin. So we're going to use as little as we can to achieve the white effect that we want in our pigment. This is looking pretty good. I'm going to completely blend that in there. Okay, so this gives us a really nice opaque white effect to our resin. And then finally, to get that bit of lacy lacing in our resin, we're going to add just 1 little drop of alcohol into the white resin. Okay, 2 drops. We'll mix that in there. Okay, so now we are ready to pour our resin onto our cutting boards. Okay, now for the fun part, we're going to pour our resin. I've placed the boards, raised them up onto some measuring cups just so that the resin can pour off. I'm going to start with this one on this side, and I'm going to pour just enough of the clear resin to cover over the handle completely. Okay, so I don't want it to go, see here, it kind of went a little bit too far over the first layer of resin that I poured, so I'm going to try to even that out a little bit. I'm measuring with my wooden stir stick. We're just going to pull the resin to cover our surface. I do want it to cover into the hole. Pour a little bit over to the side of my handle. This resin is self-leveling, so it will over time level to a flat finish. Okay, so I am in a little bit just going to go around the sides with my gloved, actually I'll do that now, just to make sure it's fully coated. My gloved finger, always wear gloves when working with this and work in a well-ventilated area, protecting your working surface, which you don't want the resin to get on a nice wood surface or anything like that. Always have paper towels on hand. Okay, now we're going to vein in our white resin. So we're just going to carefully go along this edge. And I'm ideally trying not to make the bubbles or the white dots, but rather more of a straight line. Pull that back and forth a bit. And I'm doing this at kind of all the transition points for the colors, if you think about waves cresting in the different places that they do so in the water. So it's like that. And we'll do this side now. Transition point, again here. Okay. Now in the next step, I'm going to take my air source. I'm actually just using my hair blow dryer for this, set to warm temperature. There, now we've got a little bit of the foaming crests of the waves. I like that. Over time, a little bit, you will get some of the lacing happening as it is right there. And I'm just going to watch it a bit and see if I want to add any more of the white resin in there, although I'm kind of liking this. Maybe I'll try just a touch more here right along the shoreline. Just like that, and a touch more right in here. Here looks like maybe we could go a touch more right in here. And again, I'm gonna put my, this is just an air source to help move the resin around. And that's looking pretty great. I'm gonna let this rest for a couple of minutes, and then I'm going to use my butane torch to actually pop any bubbles that arise to the surface. So it's been about 10-15 minutes now, and I'm really liking how this is looking. We've got some lacing happening of the white tinted resin, which is really pretty. Now I'm just going to use my torch and blow off some of the bubbles that have formed. So I'm going to just monitor the resin now for about another half an hour, 45 minutes, and probably repeat that a couple more times as the bubbles, just to make sure I get them all. I will just cover it to make sure that no dust settles into it and let it cure overnight. So it's now about a little over 24 hours after I poured this resin, and it's so pretty. I'm going to bring it a bit closer. Hopefully it'll focus. And now I'm just going to take off the back. So I took the tape off of this one, and I'm going to show you how that works. So this one still has the tape on it, and you just take your heat source or your air source, my blow dryer. I put it on higher heat because I want to warm up the resin, and then it'll peel right off. Actually, you can see it works pretty well. The edge of the tape, it kind of comes off, the resin comes off alongside there. There we go. It's not bad. Perfect. So I've got a couple of spots that I'm just going to sand down a little bit. Here the resin kind of bubbled up a bit. But that's okay, a little bit of sandpaper, wet sanding will clean that up. But turn this around. I actually really love how I almost love how this one turned out even more than the other one. Just the pattern of the white and the lacing really worked nicely. The resin kind of flows in different layers. I don't know, I'm pretty happy with how these turned out. What do you think? Thank you so much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this resin project, and if you'd like to see more, please leave a comment in the description below and let us know. It's our first resin project that we've done here on YouTube, and we have a whole bunch on the blog, so let us know if you'd like to see more. And if you like this video, please do give it a thumbs up, and be sure to subscribe for more nature-inspired DIY craft and home decor ideas. Bye for now!